Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming this crisp Sunday morning. It's a real honor to be moderating this conversation between Dora Longo Bahia and Gallerist Eduardo Brandão. So thank you, Mary and Annalie, for the invitation. So in this conversation, we'll be exploring the relationship between the artist and gallerist. But before we begin, I'm just going to offer some brief introductions. And from that, you'll see that there are overlaps between Dora and Eduardo, who've had a long relationship together. So Dora is a multimedia artist, and you guys can jump in and correct me whenever you want. Dora is a multimedia artist who completed a degree in artistic education in 1987 at the Armando Alvarez Penteado Foundation, otherwise known as FAP, where she also taught painting from 1994 to 2013. And since the 90s, her work has been dealing with themes surrounding urban conditions, violence, and protest. And she's been an illustrator at one of the biggest newspapers in Brazil, Folha de São Paulo, since 1993. Dora has also been a professor in visual poetics at the School of Communications and Arts at the University of São Paulo since 2013, where she also received her master's and her PhD. Her postdoctoral research resulted in her first feature-length film, The Dora Case, which she presented at Vermelho Gallery in 2016, a screening that inaugurated the gallery's new projection room, Sala Antonio. Eduardo is the founding director of Vermelho Gallery, showing here at Art Basel, Miami Beach, which he founded in 2002 along with Eliana Finkelstein. Eduardo studied photography at Brooks Institute of Photography in Santa Barbara from 1991 to 2004. He studied at Santa Barbara, and from 1991 to 2004, he worked as a photo editor in the magazine department at Folha de São Paulo. Between 1995 and 2007, he worked as a professor of photography at the Fine Arts Department of Armando Alvarez Penteado Foundation. And as an independent curator, he's organized a number of exhibitions at institutions, including the Museum of Modern Art in Sao Paulo, where he currently holds a chair on the board of directors. So, from these very short introductions, we're going to sort of begin right from the beginning. And I wanted to start by asking Dora and Eduardo how you both met. But of course, I do have to say, when I asked you both separately, you told me different stories. Eduardo said that he remembers Dora coming up to him as a photographer and asking him to photograph her work as an artist. And Dora, you remember meeting Eduardo when he came to teach at FAP.
No.
Oh, no. So I feel the truth is somewhere in between, so you can clarify for me.
No, I met. I think, well, it's been a long time, but I think I met you when I was going to do an exhibit. I was invited to do a show. I was studying at art, and he was taking pictures for some artists. So I asked him if he could take pictures of my work.
My story was the real one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you guys, so could you sort of walk me through that first meeting and how the relationship developed from there? Because then you started to teach Eduardo at the foundation where Dora was already teaching, I believe. You started in 94 and Eduardo, you started in 95?
Yeah, but it was before, like, I think when you photograph, I started photographs Dora's work, and at the same time we start talking, no? And I think we became friends. And even before we were teaching in the same university, for a while, me and some friends, we had a magazine. We're talking 87, 89, and Brazil had a dictatorship till 85. Mm-hmm. So we were always trying to start talking about art and culture, something that was forbidden there for a long time. Mm-hmm. This magazine was trying to do this. It was a magazine for young people, I mean, culture, fine arts, dance, and music. And Dora was always there with her big dogs. She had big dogs, big black dogs, yeah. And she helped us a lot, and she helped us with illustrations, and I mean, we counted on many artists' help, and Dora was one of them. What put us even more together and talking, and so it was before teaching, yes.
Okay, so then so could you take me through how you went from the magazine and the work that you did together in the 80s to how you both began teaching at the same foundation then?
Well, I was teaching, already teaching for children. I was teaching in a school for children. And then he started working in the Folha, in the newspaper. Yes, and then you invited, and I was teaching in a school, and then there was this teacher that was my teacher in the university, that's Nelson Leonard, that's I think one of the great living artists in Brazil. And he invited me to teach in the university, so I started teaching the university in '94. And at the same time, Edu also invited me to
work in the
newspaper
as an illustrator.
Yeah.
We're doing lots of, while teaching the university, I try to bring artist students to work in the newspaper. I mean, we were trying to change this newspaper look, old look, into something that we didn't know what was, but when I would see some kids that they were doing art and research in graphic art especially, I would take them to work in the newspaper. It was a mix.
Yeah,
you know?
So you were kind of, the work that you were doing with that magazine that you talked about, what was the name of the magazine?
Chaos.
Chaos.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were trying to bring some chaos into the
newspaper. Yeah, I think the magazine, I don't remember, but I think in '92, the first president we'd vote in Brazil after dictatorship, he freezed all the accounts. You know, it was, I mean, for some time we had no money neither to eat, you know, 92, 94.
It was before.
90, okay.
Yeah.
So with this, the magazine just finished. And the magazine got a prize in Japan, a design prize. And I was doing the graphic design. I was not prepared to it, but we were doing the graphic design. And by knowing that, the newspaper invited me to go and do a job there. Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting. So then when you were both working at the newspaper, then you were also teaching at the university.
Yeah.
And then it was in '95 that you came together with Felipe Shaimovic to start S-Colonia, the third floor cultural workshop. So I wonder if you guys could both talk about, introduce what this is actually and talk about how it started.
Well, it's a long time, so maybe we have different memories, but it's, I think that we have this, we were teaching in that, in a private school, art school, but it was very open, like there was no gates, and we taught in the night course, and we would stay there like until 2 a.m. and everybody could go to the classes. And as we were new teachers, I remember that like I taught on Friday evening and Saturday morning, so it's this time, the classes that nobody wants to teach. And there was lots of students that come that were no students. They were really people who wanted to attend to the classes, and the classes were very interesting. And then we start to think that when they finished school, there was no place to get together and talk about art and talk about your work and in a way make all your projects. And there were not a lot of galleries, and it was a very different art market, I think, in Brazil. So we decided to rent this place and me, Edu, and Filip Shaimovic, that he was a teacher also in that school. He was an art historian.
So Felipe was teaching art history, you were teaching painting, and Eduardo, you were photography.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but all mixed, you know, like we touch performance, we touch. The school was expensive, even though now it's even more expensive. The school was very expensive at the time. I remember my class. I had in the, I don't know how do you call, but in the paper where are the registered students.
Yeah.
I had like 4, 5, 6 students registered, and the class had like 50, 60 kids, you know.
Right.
And they could go in at the time, and then
they would just walk off.
They walk in, and
it
was fine, you know, and it was fine. The classes were big, and knowing that the direction of the school started closing it, so we thought it was not fair, you know, and we're talking about Brazil starting. I mean, it was the end of the 90s. Still, we had no cultural centers. Our museums were weak. I mean, the whole scene was difficult. So those kids, they didn't have a place to go. So we thought, let's have a place to go, you know, let's have a place to talk art.
So basically, the school realized that there were just kids coming off who weren't paying for the university course, so they started to close it off. And then you said that you rented a space, and this was in Barafunda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's
so
an
it was
industrial
actually
place.
open to people outside of the university or the...
Yeah. And they kept not paying. Yeah.
That's why we went bankrupt.
we went bankrupt, but I mean...
very fast.
Okay, well, before we go to the bankruptcy, I mean, so you started, I would love to know how, you know, you came together, the 3 teachers, and you found this space, and you brought the students in, but I'm sure it was more than students. It must have been just a kind of, you know, other people who were just practicing.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could talk about how you kind of founded the school, the workshop, and how you developed it. Like, was it just on Saturday mornings that you held it, or was it a kind of daily...
Saturday during the whole day, we would stay there till 10, 11 o'clock at night.
But there was like, we invited people to teach there in the other day, so there was classes.
Every day. Yeah.
But not really
Not
regular,
classes, we were never into classes.
It's
more
just
to
more
talks.
Like workshops.
And get together and
I mean, the list that I have here was that it was classes, ateliers, exhibitions, lectures, discussions, videos, Super 8 sessions.
Just parties, everything.
Parties.
Yeah.
And invite other, older artists that they have already a life in art to talk to them, you know, that's what we wanted. Other people talking to those youngsters. I mean, São Paulo is big, 20 million people, you know. One lives in south and 150 kilometers from the other. So we needed a place, we needed a spot to be there, you know, to talk about art. That the only thing that we wanted is what we do here is to talk about art.
Yeah.
I mean, photography, video, performance, but let's, concentrate in art. That was our only
prerogative.
Approach.
Yeah.
Point. Yeah.
So, Dora, you'd mentioned that you participated in meetings organized by Professor Herbert Duchenes at his home in the 1980s with some of his students on the plastic art course at the foundation. So I wonder if that had any...
I think not intentionally, but later when the S-Colonia had already finished, I was with my study group in my house, and I invited a teacher from Belo Horizonte, and then he reminded me. He said, I studied at FAB, and I was part of a group that Professor Herbert Duchenes invited some students to his house. And then I said, wow, that's true. I was one of them also. So he invited us. He invited us to his house, and he would project films. He had a Super 8 camera, and he would travel a lot and film the exhibitions, and he would just project it for us, and he would make some sandwiches and and serve some wine. It was really like very nice to go to his house. And I think for me it wasn't like I didn't
subconsciously,
yes, yeah.
Because apparently that for him it was a way to kind of discuss things that he wasn't able to discuss or to show in his course. So.
Yeah, it was things like for art from Taiwan or stuff that we never. And I studied during dictatorship, so there was really before internet and no books, so it was very different to see stuff. We would see art in the biennial, in São Paulo biennial, and there was one shop that imported some books, but it was really difficult and expensive. Yeah.
And Eduardo, I'm curious, thinking about these sort of previous experiences that might have fed into S-Colonia, how maybe your education at as a student of photography at the Brooks Institute, did that have any impact in the way that you imagined S-Colonia to develop as this kind of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary space of conversation and practice?
One thing I remember while I was studying in Santa Barbara is, photography and everything very right. But there was this lady, Miss Mary, she taught watercolor. She was a German lady teaching there, and she would invite to her house me and some other kids to talk about art.
Yeah.
And that was very important for me, to have not the class approach to art, but the life approach to art, I mean, we would sit down in her house, and we were all some 4 or 5 kids, and she would show books, and I mean, she loved what she was doing, when she was, teaching us there, and somehow I think I tried to do the same thing. Even though nowadays, like sometimes at the gallery, and I know that Friday night, Dora has her group there, we call a group. And I go from the gallery to see them. They're reading those texts, very philosophical and talking, and I'm there a little backwards, but I think it's a very important way of talking about art, and thinking about art. To sharing, in a house basic, it's intimate. It's like to read a book when you're by yourself reading a book, and those situations about few people talking about art, I think it's fantastic. I'm not saying that to have it in the class is bad, not at all. But I think it's very important, and I try to bring this to the gallery, I try to have it, to keep it, because I think it's important for art, it's important for the production of art, to have this somehow tenderness in thinking about it.
Yeah, so S-Colonia is a house of sharing.
Yes, yes.
Do you guys have... So S-Colonia closed in 2000, and is that right, 2000?
Yeah.
So we'll get to that, but I wonder if there's any moments in its lifespan from 95 to 2000, a particular memory or experience that you both hold quite dear or was quite moving for you or important in terms of how the school existed.
I'm sorry. I think we were 3 professors there somehow, and at the last 2 years, I felt that it was not our school. The kids, they had the key, and they put things there. They would meet there even without us. During the week that we were working, they would go there, and they assumed the place. I would say they got the place for them, and that I think it was very important. And at the end, it was very difficult for us to keep the place, not just because of economical, but because life. Life took different ways. We had things going on in life, that we didn't have more time for the S-Colonia, but we had like a seed there that didn't belong to us anymore. It belonged to a group of artists that I can see them till today, that they are doing something that, I mean, we talked there, you know, and they somehow, the idea was strong, and it didn't need us behind it. You know, that we suffered, me and Dora and Felipe, to close the school because we thought that it functioned. It had his meaning. Even though it was 1 day a week, it was strong enough, you know, for the kids to go there and do things. I would get there on Saturday and lots of works on the walls, you know. So they were there, they were doing, they were talking. And that, I think, was the most important thing for me.
Yeah.
The thing keep on going. You don't need a structure. If you put the sand, if you put the seed in a good sand, it goes, you know.
Was there anything for you, Dora?
No,
or?
it's just a joke.
Was there anything that didn't work? Was at the beginning? Did you try things that were like, oh, this isn't actually working for us?
I don't know.
Not working?
Yeah. Was it when you established the school? Were there things? Of course, there were things that worked, and it began to work on its own. But in the beginning, were there sort of trial and error? Were there kind of?
I think that what the problem is that we needed an administrator.
Yeah.
And we didn't have one, so.
And that's really, the idea of the gallery.
Yeah, that was really.
Yeah, we needed someone that would take care of the school.
Like pay the bills.
Yeah, just the sort of functional
everything.
stuff.
Yeah, and so this was.
And we didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
No one of us wanted to do that.
Not surprising.
Yeah.
But okay, so. Then it closed in 2000, and that's beautiful what you said, that, you know, that you realized that when you closed it, it was still functioning on its own. S-Colonia became an idea and kind of an approach. But then when it closed, Dora, you began to hold meetings at your house. You were still teaching. And you, instead of Saturdays, you were holding them on Friday nights with your graduate students.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you?
It was, I started to, I continued to do more or less the same thing that we did there, but I started with the students that were graduating and that had just graduated, so we would meet on Friday night. And it was also at home, so it was around the table, and we just like talk about the works or read text
and then these meetings...
And food also, everybody. Each person brought like something to eat or something to drink, so we had
Amazing.
This,
an open table.
Yeah.
And then these meetings developed into workshops that you created, the Museum of the Void. Yeah, I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we were talking about, we started talking about what was the meaning of art and, what was the social meaning of art nowadays, like, is there still a meaning? And then we start to think about a way of presenting our discussions in a practical way, not organizing speeches, but as most of the people were artists. So how we would present that our questions or our doubts or the controversies. So we were thinking about if art was something that the work of art is a way to reach something that's not only the object, but it's in the object, but also it's outside. So I appropriated a title from a drawing by Robert Smithson that's called The Museum of the Void, and then I start to call these experiences, these workshops, the Museum of the Void, and then I went to some institutions to try to organize something that was like, that had a symbolic character, but also a communal like a festival, like a communal aspect also.
Right, and the first kind of workshop that you staged in an institution was in 2001.
Yeah.
In Sierre, in Switzerland.
Yeah, in Switzerland. Yeah.
At the École Cantonale du Art du Valais.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to know how you presented that first iteration. You know, the symbolic aspect to it, and then the discursive aspects.
It was very weird because I was invited to a residency there in the art school, and then to do a workshop with the students, and we started to discuss what could we do, and I had a space to present my work, to make an exhibition. So I shared the space. So I gave them the space, and we started to think about what could we say about it. And then it was very interesting because they made like a travel on time, and they start to think about the exhibition organized by Harold Zeman in Switzerland, When Attitude become form. And then they start to think about how in Switzerland they were kind of isolated, like it's a little bit like an island, so because of the mountains maybe. And so they made this exhibition that was like if they were like lost works from artists that weren't invited to take part in the exhibition organized by Zeman. And we made this show in Sierre, and it was very weird because we made this invitation that was like these lost works, and it was a very chic invitation, I don't know. And people really took it seriously and went really, so it was kind of weird. But then I started to think about how fiction is also important for art, yeah.
So did the students actually come with you to Sierre, or did you
work
with them
I
and
work
then you
with
brought...
students, students. I stayed there for 3 months. So
so you worked with students there. Yeah. Okay, got you. And then, is it correct that the second iteration of the Museum of the Void was then staged at Vermelho Gallery in 2002?
Yeah, that's my home.
Yeah, Maram.
I have some slides, so maybe he can show. It's not slides, sorry. Some images. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you described this exhibition as an occupation of time and of the gallery's time and space. Yeah. And what was interesting is that it actually formed Vermelho's inaugural exhibitions. There were two. The first one was a group show that you staged, and then it was Maram.
Yeah, I opened the gallery, and I had this idea of having photography and video gallery, because I thought that what we needed in São Paulo. You know, you had other galleries taking care of painting, and so I thought, let's do something different. But as soon as I set the first show with photography, I felt that no, it's not that. So there was a little crisis, you know, very little. And Dora, she worked with Luiz Estrina at the time, but we were talking about art again. And what we did is like to open for 50 days instead of the 3 weeks or 4 weeks. For 50 days, we had it open. We started the show without anything, and people would go there and have their ateliers there and talk. And at the very end, we had the last day that we thought that, I mean, we had a production there, we finished the show. And that was very important for the gallery. It is very important for me too today. Like the process of doing art, how much we have this in our daily life, you know. Not to have just the fine piece there. I mean, how can we bring the thoughts to that make art, that produce art, to live in the gallery too, you know? And so I think for me, the first show that I had was Marron. Marron because the mixture of everything, of all the colors, you know. that people were there, like we were open till midnight, we were open till 10, and they were working, producing their work there, and we're talking and producing texts, producing talks and conversation, eating together. That was our second show.
So you really see this as the first kind of,
for me,
the foundation.
I mean, of course, it's not. It's the first show is on photography, but that was very fundamental for me, and it is the one that's alive till today.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually because marron, the color, is the brown. It means brown, and that plays on the name of the gallery. Red, which was you sort of came up with that name because it represents the analog process of. Developing photographs, yeah. And so Maram is a name, brown. You were kind of playing with this, but also intervening in that idea as well, kind of making physical this idea that you were talking about, that art should always be an active.
Yeah, also I think that we thought about, because brown is this color that's like colorless, that's a mixture. And there's a very interesting text by L.O.H. Sica that he says that that's called Brazil diarrhea, and he says that it is mixture, and we should really go in and dip into it, and now I think that we are deep into it really. That's things that we finally are drowned into the diarrhea.
The very last day. One of the artists, he proposed like a fight. And there was the people from the streets, they were gray, and the people from the white cube, they were dressed in white.
Amazing.
And it was one of those
water guns. Paintballs.
Paintballs, yeah. So the one from the ones from the outside, they had to get a flag, the white flag, in the middle of the white cube. And it was quite a disaster, you know. I mean, and this ended the show. And when it ended, the gallery, I mean, started it. It was completely broken, you know. And it was a good start, you know, to see that the things, they are there, but they have to change too, you know.
But I also love the story that you told me, that the idea for the gallery started because Eliana Finkelstein was, who would attend the workshops at S-Colonia. And Eduardo, you said that the idea really came when you were in New York, and you went to a gallery in New York, and...
Well, I was teaching in New York for some, like a Brazilian group of people, and Eliana, my partner that she has the gallery, she was studying with us in the S-Colonia, and she didn't want to be an artist, but she wanted to have a gallery, and so she kept on saying, let's have the gallery, let's have. I said, no way, I'm not going to be a gallerist or anything. And we were in New York, and we were inside of a gallery, and I was teaching there, and they put us out because they didn't want someone teaching in the gallery. And of course, I got kind of nervous, and I told Eliana, okay, let's have a gallery that people can sit down on the floor, we can teach, people can teach. And but it was, it was sort of a joke. I was irritated. And, but I went to Berlin, and I was there, and she called me, said, I have the place. You know, I have a place for us, you know. And that's the way it started. It was not a joke, but okay, if we do something, let's do something different than what we're living. I mean, okay, let's try to do something different,
So it's amazing then how in 2002 with Maron, these sort of seeds from S-Colonia kind of came together again. And actually, it's amazing how, you know, as you say, that exhibition really was the kind of founding show of the gallery. It expressed its identity, and, you know, that kind of really talks about, it speaks to the relationship that the two of you have together. So I wanted to just sort of think about how, you know, from that 2002 project, which inaugurated the gallery, you know, fast forward to 2016, and Dora, you screened your first feature-length film, The Dora Case, in the new screening room of the gallery. So I wanted to ask both of you how, that inauguration of Vermelho and the presentation of Marom, moving to 2016 when you present this film at the new screening space, how do you see this collaboration evolving, and how the screening of the Dora Case kind of articulates that? Because the work itself, again, develops on this idea of the analog process of photography, documentation, fiction that you discussed.
I think, well, when we did Mahon, Dora was not part of the gallery in terms. No, I mean, of course, she was always part of the gallery, but as an artist, I don't know, like, I think 6, 7 years now you're in the gallery.
Yeah,
2010. And I mean, we don't, it's funny because you do like solo shows from artists. You don't do a solo show of Dora, There's Dora and all the kids, always. So there's never a solo show, even though we think we're going to have a solo show. It's not a solo show. What I think is very important for us when Dora comes all those kids around, and they, I mean, it's. I think Dora brought this. How would I say? This aspect for the gallery. The show is not a place where you set done pieces, already done. It's a place where you show the pieces, but it's the time of discussing, it's the time of doing, it's the time of, it's alive, it's vivid. And of course, this spreads to other artists too, and somehow it became a characteristic of the gallery, to have a life going on while the show is going on, and not just her, other artists, they do the same, but I think all it started in Mahon, I think it started there. And it's alive. I think it's alive, and it needs thoughts to keep on going. It needs us to keep on thinking for it to keep on going. And the gallery is used for that too. It's used as a space, as a time for people to get together and talk about it. I think we have this
identity.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can talk about one of those exhibitions. There's Imagens Claras, Ideias Vagas, which you did in 2012. And this is one of the, when you actually worked, and you worked with different study groups. So this one was artists, and there was a wall painting and screening that the group did.
I think that maybe we could, there is the image. Can we go for? No? Yeah, but when we can pass, this one's another one that's called Vão, but then, there, this is, and also I think that maybe we had the facade of the gallery, and we had this thing. We wanted, I think, we had the project of working with cinema, like making something that in the 80s there was, we called cine clubs, that you would meet in a small place and then watch a movie, and there was a bar, and then you talk about the movie afterwards, and not a big screening space, but a small. And in this show, what I had with the students was we had read the book by Susan Sontag regarding the pain of others, together with the group, and then she talks about the relationship between the image of war and how we watch them, like photography and art. And so we chose some images, we chose some films that we thought were important, and some frames of these films, and we would paint on the facade of the gallery during the show. So every week we would start painting a new new image. So we never finished it. It's always like we can you show another one? Yeah, you see. And so it was always a work in progress. And on every Thursday night, we would paint a white canvas, a white screen on the wall, and would project a film. And so we started with this cine club on Thursdays.
On open air.
Yeah.
Two
open air
films
cine
actually.
club,
We painted a rectangular like this, and show fiction. And on the other side, we had like a little TV with a documentary on the war.
There's another one, no?
And like on Thursday night,
Amazing.
Yeah. And then from there, we were always thinking, well, we would like to make a play to make like this cine club in the gallery. So and now they managed to do the screening room. That's a very nice projector and with sofas, couches, so it's very comfortable. And we are projecting, and it started with my film. Yes, the Dora case,
and I wanted to just kind of stick with this idea that you discussed when you were first talking about the Museum of the Void and how you wanted to kind of work with these symbolic ideas, which were, could be object-based, but then they were always produced within a discursive kind of environment. And so with Imagens Claras, Ideias Vagas, you had the components of the student group or the study group working in the space and creating these live actions, but then you also had objects of your own presented. So I wonder if you could talk about how, the objects that you produce as an artist work with the actions that you kind of facilitate with the students. And I'm also curious in terms of how you manage this as an individual, as a teacher, as an artist, and then Eduardo, how you kind of observe this and facilitate this as a gallerist and curator.
Well, I'm not against the object. I think that the object art has a lot to do with objects, and what I think that with the students, what I like is to make possibilities of for them to work in a space and to work collaborative. Like I think sometimes. Artists work very lonely, and I think like collaborative work is very important. Like in movies, we work collaboratively, or when we play music, sometimes in bands or orchestra and everything. But I think that the object it has sometimes the
function.
Yeah, all the contradictions that like. Being an object and also not being only an object, and I think that's the interesting thing about the art object.
Yeah, and that kind of makes me think about the gallery, sort of being a gallery but not being a gallery. Thinking about Marom and the kind of anti-market approach that you were taking with that project, and then Eduardo, how that sort of relates to the gallery itself and its identity as at once a kind of discursive public space but also a private gallery.
I'd rather think that it's not a gallery. I think that it can be a complex gallery, because the gallery is not just a place where you go and buy art, It's the place where you perceive art. That was the place I perceived art, like Luisa just got here, when in the 80s, you didn't have a place to perceive art in Brazil. They were the galleries, and they had to do like what the museum was not doing, and I remember Luisa had the gallery, and inside the gallery she had like two sofas, one sofa and two chairs. And Luisa was always sit there, and it was not her office. Her office was in the back, but she was sitting down there, and I was friend of some artists that work with her, and we would sit there and talk inside the gallery. No, inside the gallery you had a sofa, and I think it was the responsibility of the gallerist at the time in a country, in a city that the culture had not the strength that it has today. And I think I come from there, you know. I try to have a place in front of the gallery, have this space, and there's a restaurant, and there are table, people eat there, and I prefer to think we don't know yet everything that a gallery can do. You know, I mean, it has to be active. I'm not interested to have a place just to put things on the wall and the space and sell it. I start the gallery, I was 40 whatever years old, you know. I want to have fun, you know, and of course we have to sell, no doubts about that, we all live on that, but it's not just selling, it's thinking, you know, because if you stop thinking too, you stop selling too, you know, and it's automatic. And so the pieces, like last show of Dora, she went to like a samba school after Carnival, and the big piece we had in the white cube that we have there, we had this immense allegory, like a horse, immense horse that they use for the samba schools, you know. It was falling apart, it had wings, you know. It was junk, you know, completely junk. And I mean, it's there, you know, and it puts you to think. I have to give me some time to think about what Dora is interested in, not how am I going to sell this, or you know. So I use the gallery for that, for thinking, you know.
Yeah. So it's kind of, that's interesting because it relates to how you have commented before on how the galleries sometimes prop up the public institution system, and it's sort of existing between the public and private in terms of its function. And that makes me think about Dora, because, you know, you've presented, you know, the Museum of the Voids, these study groups and these workshops in institutional and gallery spaces. So, and you've also worked with different groups. So, I mean, recently you participated in the 28th Sao Paulo Biennial with Anarchidemia, which was one study group that was made up of artists, I think it was. But then for Ashes, which you showed at Vermelho in 2017, it was after the end of arts, which is another group that was multidisciplinary. So I wondered, Dora, how you kind of mediate these different groups and different spaces as well. Do you see a difference between the institutional and private space, for instance? And how do you manage the differences between the groups that you're working with, which I assume some of them come from the university, but others don't.
Yeah. No, I think it's the same group. It's not the same group, but it's the same, because it's not the same people. I'm the same person, but it's the same. It's just it's an open group, so people come and go. So there are some people that stay and some people that go, and then like Anarchidemia, it was this project we did for the biennial, and I think that in the beginning I thought that it would be different to work in a public space than a private space, but I think it's not. Well, there are some differences, but I think that's nowadays what we want to do is really try to make a material to in a way try to show materialistically what we are discussing or reading, or so the groups differ a little bit because. When you put some people together, even if it's like we three and then he comes, it's always a little bit different. But in a way,
the idea stays the same.
Yeah. We just sit and read and talk and think about something to do.
So would you say that sort of still the seeds of S-Colonia still kind of manifesting themselves?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and Eduardo, how do you feel about this? Do you feel like S-Colonia is still very much present in what you do and in your work?
Yeah, but I think nowadays, more than that, the newspaper. like I was looking, the last show that Dora had, you know, she had the show, and in the entrance of the gallery, we had those kids there, those young artists, and it was a time, we were in São Paulo, we are in the, close to Paulista. It's a big avenue where all the, where people go out and like for the manifestations, you know, the manifestations they have there. And we had quite a very full years, those last 2 or 3 years, you know. So we had manifestations almost every day. And those kids, they were they were getting in the newspaper in the morning, choosing some news and work on those news, you know. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you know, you go in the manifestation right after. I mean, you walk 3 blocks and you're there, you know. So I think this heat that we have in the newspaper, I mean, it's happening and we're producing. You might say, well, art, you don't produce like this, you know. It's not like things are happening in the streets and then you come here and you produce art.
Right.
And I say, well, why not?
Yeah.
I mean, what's to produce art? Who has the formula, you know? And they were producing things and then sometimes getting like, I don't know how to say, those big, written bands.
Like the banners.
Like banners, and I mean, they're producing inside the gallery and take the banners outside in the streets, you know. And I think, I was just thinking, what is this? What we're producing, you know? I don't know what we're producing somehow. I mean, that's the thoughts of those kids, and they are thinking they are producing art, and the art has to answer what is happening in the street. So they are producing art, you know? And this, I think, is very interesting. That gets you in the stomach, too, not just here. And art, I think it's produced on those 2 places, you know? So I felt having the gallery there, in this place where we are, and this show of Dora and the kids there, and I go, and the place where I eat, and I see everything going on, and I'm there seeing, I mean, political, what we live in, and those kids participating with things that they produce in the gallery. I think it makes sense. Yeah. Somehow, if you ask me, I mean, how? Maybe I don't know how to answer you, you know, but it makes sense. I mean, it's urgent, and art is urgent. I see art as urgent. And they have this urgency, you know. So
that was the printing press that you set up in the gallery as part of Ashes in 2017 that you were talking about. Yeah. And so along with that, talking about bringing the outside in and the inside out, I mean, that exhibition also included your works, and part of it was you painted the walls the same gray that the city of Sao Paulo was covering the graffiti at the time. And that exhibition actually really speaks to the way that you kind of explore manifestations of protest, both from a local perspective, but also you kind of explore its global manifestations as well. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that in relation to Ashes, but it's also kind of fed into other work, like exhibitions like Black Bloc or Imagens Claras, Ideias Vagas.
Well, I think, I don't know. It's I don't know. Can you make an specific question?
Yeah, so
because it's really like I can.
Right. So with Ashes, that exhibition, I mean, you had the printing press, and then you had what Eduardo was talking about, which is the group kind of going outside and going in and producing and reacting and responding and taking it out again. And I was wondering how you sort of related that to the actual works that you produced within the gallery space, and how that kind of produces a similar dynamic between inside, outside.
Well, this is the exhibition Ashes because of it was just after Carnival, and in Portuguese Ashes is cinzas, and it's the same color for gray, the same name for gray, so it's the same word for ashes and gray, and so there was this work that he said it was junk, it was this part of a allegorical car from the samba school, and we put the car inside the gallery, and it was really for me it was very impressive because it's very small. The car was a very small allegorical car when it was on the streets, but inside the gallery it was really this monster, huge, and junk also, because it's something that's done just to last one day. So it's really like, it has already lasted one day, so it was like this leftovers of the carnival. So the joy and happiness has already passed, and now we are in this gray period. And our mayor in São Paulo, he started, he's a little Trump, because he has much less power than Trump, but he's a guy that doesn't come from politics. He is an advertisement guy and a self-made guy. And one of the first things he did when he became mayor was to paint the walls of the city with gray, like pretend a gray that's similar to concrete. That's the gray that you can see that I painted the facade of the gallery, but to cover the ugly dirtiness of the graffitis. And it was really like everybody, the city suddenly said, wow, why are you doing that? You know, some of the graffiti that he covered were guys like the Gêmeos, I don't know, but they are, the twins, the well-known graffitis. And some of them were really postcards from the city, and then suddenly the guy goes there and paid everything. And who decides what's public and what's private? And so I used his color to cover some of my paintings also.
And these were paintings from key moments in your...
Yeah, or paintings from, like some paintings from key moments of my work. And I think they are much better now that they are gray, but it's really like
but also this
erasing. Maybe he was right.
So the clown face, that's Tim Curry from It, right?
Yeah, that's because also I had we had this Olympic, beautiful Olympic Games, and I collected the newspapers from during the period of the Olympic Games in Brazil, and it was a period that we are like talking about Olympics and everything, and we had this huge crisis, political crisis, with the president being impeached, and so the newspapers were really like weird, because you have this, oh look, the beautiful swimmer or whatever, and the political problems. So I painted clowns on top of the newspapers, and that's the most tacky thing that you can paint. I think it's clown. Nobody paints clowns or horses, but it's and there's also a funny joke that I think it's an infamous joke, but when you in Portuguese, Olympic Games is Olimpíadas. But if you change, I don't know if someone here speaks Portuguese, but if you change the accent, the accent, so instead of Olimpíadas, it becomes Olimpiadas, and piadas is jokes. So it's how we called the Olympic Games, because it was really like this
joke.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to stay on that idea though, because I was thinking about this series actually, the newspapers that you collected, and then you put the clown, and the Olympics is this kind of local joke, this global local joke. And as I mentioned before, with Imagens Claras and Ideas Vagas, for instance, you had paintings that were exploring kind of conflict zones around the world.
Yeah.
In the Dora case, you were kind of creating a distorted connection between May '68 in Paris in June 2013 and in Sao Paulo. So I'm very curious about this local global dynamic that you work with actually. But I was also, I was curious also in terms of Eduardo. You've mentioned actually. I read a quote that you had when you talked about the case with the Brazilian art scene was because of some 20 years of dictatorship. It was very good at speaking to itself, but not so good at speaking outside, and that this has really only been happening in the recent years. So there's this kind of local global dynamic that I'm curious about in terms of how you both work with that in your own practices as a gallerist and as an artist, which somehow kind of moves on from the S-Colonia, going from that sort of how you do private, public, etc., and kind of bringing these different spaces together.
Well, we talk we say that we talk regionally, you know. I see like the young artists when they live in São Paulo, we have this city, and they are answering to it, you know, and sometimes answering to specific situations of the city, you know, and of the people that live in, and producing art, thinking this place and the people that live here, how we're living, how do we react to things, what do we call culture here. And I thought that was very regional, and that it's our face, you know, it's how to communicate with others, you know, I mean, how to communicate to Hong Kong, to Mexico, and when we are regional and this regional becomes universal, when regional becomes universal, no? And that is what we are doing here today, you know. We use the books, we use the fairs, we use situations that we have nowadays to bring what we do there and try to understand what they are producing here and to get there, and I mean, and create a system, no? Yeah. But it's quite, now it's easier for us to understand how our regional can become universal, you know, because I do think when you do something in New York very regional, it's universal at the time, at the spot. You're doing it and it's becoming universal. When you're doing something in Berlin nowadays in art, I mean, it's very regional. You respond in there, but at the same, 1 second already is universal. When we in the outskirts, you know, like in São Paulo, I mean, what you produce there that can be meaningful to other cultures, you know? So participating to like the system is my duty to bring what we produce in there and bring in here to be exposed. And we always wonder how effective this is, you know.
And this relates, Dora, to what you've said about the Void Museum project when you said the purpose of these experiments, I'm quoting you now, the purpose of these experiments is to demonstrate that an artwork is a pretext for the experience of art and its articulation of vectors that connect objects to subjects. You're going to just distill it.
Well, I was thinking more than I was saying that I was answering the other question, that I think that for me, I think about this thing with local and global. I think for me the biggest influence was the punk movement. Like in São Paulo, we had this big punk movement in the late 70s, early 80s. And it was, you know, like we were in dictatorship and there was no internet, but we would go to the center of the city and there was this tapes, like with bands from Finland or from California, and then fanzines, like written in, I don't know, Danish. But then, I don't know how they got there, but then you just have this thing that was much more horizontal, like urban centers that were communicating among each other. And sometimes, you know, like when you're from São Paulo and you have this big urban center and pollution and gray, and then it's very difficult sometimes to relate to something that's called Brazilian for some people that's out, like for instance, to go from São Paulo to Rondônia, it's more expensive than to go from São Paulo to Miami. And it's Brazil, it's a very big thing, so it's really difficult to say, well, I don't know, this has always been a difficult thing, like to say, well, I'm Brazilian, and people say, oh, in Brazil we do that, but which Brazil are you talking about? You know, like, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
So, last year I went to Rondônia to make a film, and Rondônia is in the Amazon forest, like near, and I wanted to film the forest. And it was like, there was people, like I met lots of people there that had never been to the sea. So they're really very far away from the sea. They have never seen the sea. And they are in the middle of the Amazonic jungle. And they're very different from someone else. So it's, I think that's, this local and global thing, it's always,
a discussion.
Yeah, and it's not really, it's what's global also, you know, it's global. If you have internet, if you're there in Rondônia, in, I don't know, Jaci, Paraná, you don't have internet, you're not global at all, and so.
Which kind of brings us back to S-Colonia and the whole idea of just bringing it back to the conversation, people together, thinking. I have one more question, but we're running out of time, so I just wanted to see if there's anyone who has a question from the floor. We have mics. Yeah, there's one over here.
Eduardo, I thought, and Donna, thank you for being here. I thought it might be interesting to comment on your direction, which seems to be taking on some of the functions that we now envision a museum could do. And yet you seem to be doing them better in terms of engaging people and letting them be freer to think about what's being presented. Do you want to talk about the kind of contrast between running a gallery the way you do and how a museum may approach its programming?
Well, I think I'm trying to run in a gallery. I think we do what we know, and it took me a while, it's taken me a while to learn how to be a gallerist. I curated some shows, I was a teacher, photographer, so that is what I had, you know, and that was my luggage, you know. And now I'm studying a lot about administration and economy. I let you know that, you know, because I want to do it good, you know. I don't want to. But I think we have a baptism in terms of how the gallery was. It started, and it started like a gathering. We have other things that we do, other activities that one could think we're crazy. We do like a performance festival, and every year in the middle of the year in July, because it's our not rainy season, and we use the outside lots. We have for 12 years now, we do this performance. That performance from all over the world actually goes there. And many, they don't know even the name of the gallery because the performance festival is called Verb. And they go for Verbo, they don't go for the gallery. And us, and to tell you, like, we never know the size of it because we depend on the money that we are gonna sell, the amount of selling of the first semester, to manage how big we're going to be. If we're going to have 30 guys, I mean 30 performers or 20, are we going to be able to invite because we depend on the amount of selling. So, like I said, I try to have a space with a group of people there. The team that I have working in the gallery is wonderful. We all have the same intention, and that's quite unique. I count on them. I'm talking me here, but it's not like that. I have like, I could say 100% of the people that work in the gallery, we are around 20 there, they know what we are doing, and we are doing, a group of people, we are doing. If I'm not there, the things keep on going, you know, and so it's not me. That I think was the big part of the game. I was able to put people together that they want the same thing, and this helps a lot, and this helps a lot. I think nowadays the museums in Brazil are doing a wonderful work. So I don't need to do anything that the museum will do. I can just imagine other things and try to do them. But I think it's all art, you know, it's all art. One gallery comes with something, we come with something else, and it's other thing. Like in São Paulo, the galleries, they go along very well. And we talk to each other lots. And I think because we come from this time that had nothing much happening cultural-wise, so we had to get together too, you know. But we keep with that. And so you have different galleries with different inputs. I am trying to do a system, a cultural system in São Paulo. I don't know if I answered you. Sort of.
Do you have any other questions? Well, I do have one more. Just thinking about how long your relationship has been, you know, from the 80s to now. And actually, when we were talking about this, Eduardo and Dora both said that they don't look back, they look forward. So it's been interesting for them to kind of really think back to the work that they've done together and your relationship with each other. So I wonder how you feel, actually, having looked back, thinking about how you started, where you are now, and where do you think you're going, together and apart?
Well, we were talking before, like we met you 2 days ago, and we had the chance to talk a little, and we left, and we were walking. I told Dora, I think we have a very productive friendship, you know, and I had this feeling. And, well, I think somehow, not talking about friendship, about feelings, but we use each other. We use a lot each other. I think Dora, for her work, she needs people to go with her. I mean, the students, and I think I'm part of her plan, you know. So she used me to have her work to keep on going, and I use her to keep on thinking. Like I told you, like we have our life, we go to this restaurant every week, at least 2 times. We sit down and they know what they're gonna bring to our food. It's like our house, but it's like an island. We go there and we can talk about so many things, you know, but we talk about art and politics. That's what we talk about, you know. And that keeps me on thinking. A little gossip. Yeah. Depends on the alcohol. Yeah. But that keeps me going, you know, keeps me thinking. And not just with Dora. I mean, other artists, I get to be friends, and I try to bring their thoughts to the gallery, because the gallery represents them and cannot be something different than their thoughts, I suppose. It is. It's not the same thing, of course not. We are business, you know, but I mean, how you conduct this business, how to put life in this business, which life you put in this business, you know. And since we represent art pieces, we represent people. We represent thought. I cannot do different than what they think. It would be very difficult for me to represent an artist with completely different thoughts about politics. You know, would be very difficult. And I think you have to the house has to be their home. The gallery has to be their home. So that's what I try in those talking, you know, to adjust and to sync with them how to be in life, how to be here, you know, dressed with what, you know, I mean, how do I represent you? And I think this, we adjust in daily life, you know, we adjust in our talk by phone, our sitting down, when I go on Friday to see what she's doing with the kids, and I think it's very important to be friends. Yeah. I think it's very important to be friends of you, who you represent, you know. It's not just for them, it's for me too, you know. I don't want to represent something that I don't agree.
Yeah. Dora, how do you feel?
Yes, well, I think it's as he said. I think we meet every week. We're very lazy. We go to the same restaurant that we don't even have to order. You know, we have our table and they bring the same food and we just talk everything. And
so almost it's as if it again goes back to what you said about S-Colonia, that the seeds were there and they've kept growing. And you've kind of taken them in different directions, but sort of kept that connection to each other as well. So, I mean, I think, Dora, my final question then would be, you know, thinking back to those days, the origins of S-Colonia, are there any core ideas that you think have really stayed with you?
Yeah, I think I think the biggest one is that what's art, you know, and why are we doing that in this world that's like that?
Yeah.
So that's why I think I keep on studying or trying to. I think that's what we do. We are trying to think about or to find the reason. I don't know. Yeah.
Well,
that's
finding a reason
thing.
it's an ongoing thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's a very good place to end the conversation. So thank you so much, the both of you, for being so generous with your time and your memories.
Thank you for reading
thank you
everything.
for your big research on us. We were highly impressed. We were impressed with your research. Yeah, I mean, thank you very much.
No, thank you.